Doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderful, thank you. So we've been talking for a bit outside of YouTube, and we decided we wanted to do this joint podcast. And the topic that we decided we want to touch on first, that we're going to be discussing today, is about how to become your own bank. So this is our first joint podcast, so I figured we'd take a moment to introduce ourselves. So I'm going to just go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Expat Stacker, and I am an expat from the US. I've been living, traveling, and working overseas for almost 2 decades. And I first got into hard money as a student back in 2007, 2008, but didn't actually start stacking for almost another decade. Now I'm in my 30s and I stack as a savings, as a hedge against inflation, as a way to provide safety and security for my family in times of need, and to secure my existence in retirement, and to hopefully pass on a generational asset. So that's about me. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Silver Conundrum. I'm 39 years old, United States. Been all over the world a couple of times because of my job. I started stacking when I was about 9 years old, not because it was something I wanted to do, just something my dad introduced me in. So that was my introduction into silver. When I found a piece of silver on a beach one day, and I went to go throw it back in the ocean, and he kind of explained to me what it was, and that was the start of everything for me. Stacked all the way up till I was about 18 years old. I say stacked, but it is what it is. Dad charged me rent, took half my rent, set it aside. I got married. He gave me everything he ever bought for me with the rent money in quotations. And we pretty much took that money there. And when my father passed away, before he passed away, he gave me everything he had. And one thing led to another. My wife and I paid off some bills with the silver in 2012, our house and stuff, and we're trying to reaccomplish what we did before everything happens. We have two kids that we want to make sure we provide for, pass down generational wealth to, and try to beat the inflation. They keep printing money the way they do, so what's the harm?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Thanks for introducing yourself. And we just want to let everybody know before we start our discussion today that this is a little disclaimer that Expat Stacker and Silver Conundrum are not financial advisors or experts. Investing is risky, so you should talk to a licensed professional before making any decisions about what to do with your money. And this video and all the content on our channels is for entertainment and educational purposes only, and you should not take this as financial advice. All right, so with that out of the way, let's get into the topic today, which is banks, right? Banks, everybody's favorite, banks, right?
Yeah.
We want to become our own banks because everybody loves banks, right? So,
Oh man, I tell you, bunch of crooks.
yeah, exactly. So, right. So that's why we want to talk about this interesting subject. And in your introduction there, you kind of talked about how your stack has, how you got into it and how it's affected your life and everything. And I think that becoming your own bank, like we hear people say that, and it seems pretty straightforward, but to me, it seems like it'd be something that's a little trickier than it actually sounds, right? So, like, what were some things that if you were to start today with no stack, right? Let's say you're a little younger and you're graduating from university and you're entering the job market and stuff like that. Let's just say Silver Conundrum is in that position. Then, and you had like maybe a little bit of credit card debt, no savings, no stack, nothing. What would you do, right? If you had the knowledge, if you were given the knowledge that you have now, like where would you recommend to yourself that you start before becoming your own bank?
Sure. So I guess the question would be the knowledge that I have now transferred to a younger me with a credit card and a little bit of debt attached to it. Correct?
Right, right.
That man, that's a difficult question in a way because debt is more of a The way I look at debt is more of a slave style mentality. I would first tell myself I need to look at getting a job that's going to cover two aspects. One, it's going to cover me financially to cover the debt, and two, it needs to cover my needs. So those would be the first things I would tell myself. I would have to apply myself to whether it be one job, two jobs, or one job that allows me to work extra hours to accomplish what we need. So that would be the very first thing I would tell myself to do is get the hours needed to pay off that credit card. Because once that credit card's out of the way, then I can take all my extra funds that I'm not using towards that debt and start slowly stacking a little here and a little there. Because in the long run, it'll add up. You don't have to do it all at one time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because I've seen like a lot of stacking channels and stuff, and they say, they some of them they have videos, and they say stuff like they have these videos where they talk about like if you're new to stacking, here's what I recommend you do, and some of them say like to get out of debt, but some of them do not say that. So like, it sounds like you would agree with that as like a first step, right? Is to get out of debt first. That's kind of like the most first and foremost thing that you need to do, because like you said, it's kind of like it not only like takes away your money, but it puts you in this mentality of like almost like a slave, right? And so banks don't have that mentality. So if you want to become your own bank, you got to get into the position. You got to put yourself into the position where you'll be able to think like one. Is that right?
Exactly, man. I couldn't have said it better myself. You got to think about it. Banks are in the business to loan money and make you indebted to them. So if you're indebted to nobody but yourself when you start your own stack and you can control where your money goes and how you manipulate your money, then there's nothing you can't do. Nobody can tell you what you can and cannot buy. So as long as you're able to get all your debt out of the way and you're able to stack, then you're golden. If you can do both at the exact same time, brother, you're so far ahead of the game, you would make most people's heads spin. So if you can do both of those things, it goes back to exactly what you just said. You control everything in your life when you get out of debt.
All right. Yeah. Awesome. Yes. Getting out of debt is definitely number one. And so another thing that I hear on a lot of the stacking channels that I wanted to get your take on as well, is is savings in fiat. So a lot of them say, you have to start, you have to have 3 months of savings saved up before you start stacking, and because you do not want to have to like get some silver and then sell it because you didn't have any savings. And right, so like they recommend building up this big amount of savings. And with the beer flu and everything going on, we kind of see a perfect example of that. A lot of people maybe didn't have enough savings, and so they kind of they kind of got screwed in a lot of ways, because they were not allowed to go to work or anything like that, and they maybe had to get into a bunch of debt. So I mean, how do you view savings? Like you're saying that you should definitely pay off the credit first, but what about savings? Like how much would you tell yourself, right? We're not giving financial advice, but if you had to start from scratch, how much savings in fiat would you have before you start acquiring silver?
Well, to me, that's a tricky question because I'm one of those guys who doesn't do a savings account in fiat anymore, not like I used to. I would tell myself right now, make sure you at least have enough money to cover any major expense. And I would consider any major expense $1,000 to $1,500. That to me isn't a major expense. So I would at least keep that much money aside. If you have rent, you pay rent, I would keep at least 1 or 2 months rent aside, whatever that may be. I mean, you can go without a lot of things, but you can't go without a roof over your head. So that would be one of the things I would tell myself. The other thing I would tell myself is if you have any extra income, no matter what it is, put it towards the silver. Because here's what happens. If you keep throwing your money into just say a savings account, or you throw it in the bank or wherever you want to put it at, today that money might be worth $1. Tomorrow, inflation might kick in, like we're seeing today, and you lose 10% of your purchasing power with it. But if you would have bought that silver, you maintain your power. If not, you actually gain purchasing power. So I would always tell myself keep at least 1,500 bucks, 1,000 to 1,500 in savings, and or whatever you may need for rent, if that's the case. And then every dime you have left over that you're not spending, put it into a precious metal. Because I mean, you can cash that out at any given time, and I would go that route.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good. And obviously, rent, like the cost of living and those things varies all over the place. So, you know, um, that is also something people have to take into consideration. Um, and I'll use myself as a personal example as well. I mean, I had a little bit of savings, but I I didn't have, whatever X amount of months of my salary saved up or anything like that. And I just once I started stacking, I put a little bit into savings and a little bit into precious metals and a little bit into, some other investments of mine that so like I didn't really necessarily I just tried to do what I thought was safe because I think the number one thing, it's not about having X amount of dollars in fiat in the bank. It's more about, especially if you have a family, right? You don't want to risk their safety and their security and stuff like that. And you also, as you mentioned, like you could turn around and sell your precious metals at any time, right? But also, if you buy it one day and have to turn around and sell it in a short period of time, you might lose a little bit of money. So that's why people say that they want to avoid that. So, um, yeah, and I mean, what
Well,
would you say? How would you
well, with that being said, well, with that being said, you might lose a little bit of money. Think about this: banks are charging you money nowadays to put in a savings account. So even
yeah,
if you put your money in a savings account or a checking account, there's a monthly fee associated with that. So if you don't have a minimum amount in there anyway, some of the banks that I've been dealing with, I have three different bank accounts, and they have a minimum. Some of them have a minimum of a $5,000 savings account limit. If you don't have that in there, they charge you $10 a month. It don't sound like a lot, but it is. And then some other banks I have, like Bank of America, I used to have, man, they would burn you on fees. They would have a transaction fee. They would have a deposit fee. They would have a monthly maintenance fee. It was like $13 at the end of the month every month. So while you think you're getting money, you're really only gaining like 0.0001% on your funds. That ain't nothing in today's market. So in reality, you're losing fiat currency in a bank. But if you put it towards a precious metal, yeah, you might lose a little bit, but you're not going to lose nowhere near as much as you did if you put it in a bank itself.
yes, that is very true. That is a good point. That is definitely a good point. And there is a small, um, fee to convert your fiat currency into precious metals, right? That's what we call premiums because it takes time and effort and skill and labor in order to turn that raw physical element into a piece of bullion, right? So that's what we're paying for when we pay for premiums, along with other things. But to me, I've reached the point now where in my stacking where I think that the premium that I have to pay is just the small price that I have to pay in order to trade fake money for real money. And I don't mind doing that so much because I'm getting real money, right? So the fees, the bank fees that you talk about when we talk about becoming your own bank, we can kind of think about premiums, and then if you do have to turn around and sell precious metals quickly, although that's not ideal, it's still right when you compare the two, like a commercial bank versus being your own bank. It's very similar. So, um, why do you think that those banks charge all of those fees? By the way.
Well, they got to make their money too. Here's how. Think about this right here, man. If the bank, by the bank, I'm talking about the Fed, they loan a bank money or currency. Let's just use the term currency. They loan a bank currency. That bank then loans that currency to you. Well, if they loan that currency to you and you have to go out and spend it, and then next person puts that money or that currency back into the bank, they just got to find some way to retrieve that money that they put out into the market. So they keep taking skimming off the top is all they're doing. To me, it's just organized crime. It's just them stealing from you because why don't they? They're going to charge you for everything else. So if they can steal a couple dollars from every single person that banks there, at the end of the year, that's billions of dollars, not millions, but billions. So
Yeah.
when you look at the grand scheme of things, that's just another source of income from them.
Right. And I think that with interest rates really low, it's even more in their interest to do that. And I also think that even doing things that are illegal, Wells Fargo is pretty notorious bank for having been busted and fined so many times. I think 2 years ago they got a record fine of a few $1 billion because they had two scandals. One was well, we call them a scandal. I think they call it the cost of business. They had one where they were opening up fake accounts, basically, with maybe, I don't know, stolen information or made up information, so that they could look like they were bigger than they were, right? That's called fraud, by the way. If you or I do that, guess where we're going, right?
Well, bro, we're going to prison.
Exactly. But Wells Fargo, they got a fine, which was much less than their quarterly profits for that quarter. Mean, I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but for anybody who's interested, you can go look. So when they're still making money when they have to pay a fine in a single quarter. I'm not talking about revenue. I'm talking about I'm talking about profits. They were still profitable even though they had to pay that fine. So is that a disincentive for that kind of behavior? I don't think so. And another one had to do with auto insurance, and I can't remember exactly what happened with that one, but yeah, it's ridiculous. You said it's organized crime, and something is only a crime if we make a law and say it's a crime. But anything else, that's how our legal system works in the United States, right? And in a lot of countries. If something is not specifically made a crime, then it's not a crime. So think about texting, we were around when texting first became a real big thing, and you could text and drive, no problem. It wasn't illegal, even though it was causing accidents and it was discouraged. It wasn't illegal behavior until they made it illegal, and that's the same thing with a lot of these banks, in my opinion. They do things that are technically legal, but should be illegal. So that's why we want to encourage people to become their own banks. All right.
All right, that's going to do it for this first part of this mini episode of this discussion on becoming your own bank. And we are going to have a few parts to this discussion, this conversation between Silver Conundrum and I. So stay tuned for the next part. Not sure exactly how many parts there'll be. 2, 3, or 4 or something like that, and I'll be posting this one to my channel, and next week or so pay attention for the next part, which will be posted on Silver Conundrum's channel. We hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. We'll catch you next time.